The Real Benjamin Franklin, Chapter 4. Setting his course in Philadelphia. Soon after his return to Philadelphia, Benjamin came across Sir William Keith, who in 1724 had sent him to England under false pretenses. Keith was no longer governor of Pennsylvania. I met him walking the streets as a common citizen. He seemed a little ashamed at seeing me, but passed without saying anything, and Franklin himself felt some shame when he again saw Deborah Reed, now Deborah Rogers. After receiving Ben's only letter from England, she had given in to her friend's urging and married John Rogers, a potter, in August 1725. She left him, however, when she learned that he had another wife. Rogers spent her dowry, fell into debt, and fled in 1727 to the West Indies, where he reportedly died. Young Franklin came close to death himself a few months after arriving in Philadelphia. He later described how the incident resulted in his return to the printing trade. Mr. Dunham took a store in Water Street where we opened our goods. I attended the business diligently, studied accounts, and grew in a little time expert at selling. We lodged and boarded together. He counseled me as a father, having a sincere regard for me. I respected and loved him, and we might have gone on together very happily, but in the beginning of February 1727, when I had just passed my 21st year, we both were taken ill. My distemper was a pleurisy, which very nearly carried me off. I suffered a good deal, gave up the point in my own mind, and was rather disappointed when I found myself recovering, regretting in some degree that I must now have all that disagreeable work to do over again. I forget what his distemper was. It held him a long time and at length carried him off. The store was taken into the care of his executors, and my employment under him ended. My former employer, Samuel Keimer, tempted me with an offer of large wages by the year to come and take the management of his printing house, that he might better attend his stationer's shop. I had heard a bad character of him in London, and was not fond of having any more to do with him. I tried for further employment as a merchant's clerk, but not readily meeting with any, I closed again with Keimer. As manager of Keimer's printing shop, Franklin trained the apprentices and journeymen in their duties, cast his own types using a mold he had contrived himself, and even manufactured his own ink. When Keimer obtained a contract to print paper money for the province of New Jersey, Franklin designed and prepared the first copperplate press in America. As he became known for his diligence and for the quality of his work, his reputation in the community increased. But his relationship with Keimer gradually deteriorated, and in early 1728, Franklin and Hugh Meredith, another of Keimer's employees, set up their own printing house with a loan from Meredith's father. It was certainly not an equal partnership, however, as Meredith was no compositor, a poor pressman, and seldom sober. So Franklin managed the shop by himself. By July 1730, he found new creditors and bought out Meredith's interest in the business. Now fully on his own, he continued to build his reputation for industry and good workmanship. The industry of that Franklin, reported one respected Philadelphia merchant, is superior to anything I ever saw of the kind. I see him still at work when I go home, and he is at work again before his neighbors are out of bed. I began now gradually to pay off the debt I was under for the printing house. In order to secure my credit and character as a tradesman, I took care not only to be in reality industrious and frugal, but to avoid all appearances of the contrary. I dressed plainly. I was seen at no places of idle diversion. I never went out fishing or shooting. A book, indeed, sometimes debauched me from my work, but that was seldom, snug, and gave no scandal. And to show that I was not above my business, I sometimes brought home the paper I purchased at the stores through the streets on a wheelbarrow. Thus, being esteemed an industrious, thriving young man, and paying duly for what I bought, the merchants who imported stationery solicited my custom. Others proposed supplying me with books, and I went on swimmingly. Even before dissolving his partnership with Hugh Meredith, Franklin became the publisher of Philadelphia's second newspaper, the Pennsylvania Gazette. Samuel Keimer, who had initiated the paper in 1728, sold it to his former shop manager before going out of business altogether. Franklin appealed for public support in the preface to his first issue of the Gazette. There are many who have long desired to see a good newspaper in Pennsylvania, and we hope those gentlemen who are able will contribute towards the making of this such. We may assure the public that as far as the encouragement we meet with will enable us, no care and pains will be admitted that may make the Pennsylvania Gazette as agreeable and useful in entertainment as the nature of the thing will allow. Within a short time, his high hopes began to be realized. Our first papers made a quite different appearance from any before in the province, a better type and better printed, but some spirited remarks of my writing on the dispute then going on between Governor William Burnet and the Massachusetts Assembly struck the principal people, occasioned the paper and the manager of it to be much talked of, and in a few weeks brought them all to be our subscribers. Their example was followed by many, and our numbers went on growing continually. This was one of the first good effects of my having learned a little to scribble. Another was that the leading men, seeing a newspaper now in the hands of one who could also handle a pen, thought it convenient to oblige and encourage me. My competitor, Andrew Bradford, still printed the votes and laws and other public business. He had printed an address of the Pennsylvania House to the governor in a coarse, blundering manner. We reprinted it elegantly and correctly and sent one to every member. They were sensible of the difference. It strengthened the hands of our friends in the House, and they voted us their printers for the year ensuing. At the age of 23, Benjamin Franklin was truly on his way toward a successful business career. While he was still working for Kiemer in 1727, Franklin formed most of his ingenious acquaintances into a club for mutual improvement, which we called the Junto. We met on Friday evenings. The rules I drew up required that every member in his turn should produce one or more queries on any point of morals, politics, or natural philosophy to be discussed by the company, and once in 3 months produce and read an essay of his own writing on any subject he pleased. Our debates were to be under the direction of a president and to be conducted in the sincere spirit of inquiry after truth, without fondness for dispute or desire of victory, and to prevent warmth, all expressions of positiveness, in my opinion, or of direct contradiction, were after some time made contraband and prohibited under small pecuniary penalties. As an old man, Franklin recalled that the club continued almost 40 years and was the best school of philosophy, morals, and politics that then existed in the province. Many of the public projects were later improved. The quality of life in Philadelphia originated in discussions of the Junto, and most of these were first advocated by the club's founder. The paper money controversy. Another opportunity for community involvement came in 1729. About this time, there was a cry among the people for more paper money, only £15,000 being extant in the province, and that soon to be sunk. The wealthy inhabitants opposed any addition, being against all paper currency from an apprehension that it would depreciate, as it had done in New England, to the prejudice of all creditors. We had discussed this point in our Junto, where I was on the side of the addition. Our debates possessed me so fully of the subject that I wrote and printed an anonymous pamphlet on it. This pamphlet, entitled A Modest Inquiry into the Nature and Necessity of a Paper Currency, was published in 1829. It argued almost half a century before Adam Smith said the same thing in his Wreath of Nations, that the only reliable standard of value was the labor of the people. Because of this and his other early expressions of basic economic principles, Franklin later came to be called the first American economist. For many ages, those parts of the world which are engaged in commerce have fixed upon gold and silver as the chief and most proper materials for medium of exchange, they being in themselves valuable metals for their fineness, beauty, and scarcity. By these, particularly by silver, it has been usual to value all things else. But as silver itself is of no certain permanent value, being worth more or less according to its scarcity or plenty, therefore it seems requisite to fix upon something else more proper to be made a measure of values, and this I take to be labor. The riches of a country are to be valued by the quantity of labor its inhabitants are able to purchase, and not by the quantity of silver and gold they possess. Trade in general being nothing else but the exchange of labor for labor, the value of things is most justly measured by labor. Having established this concept, the pamphlet went on to brilliantly urge a more plentiful supply of paper currency, which itself merely serves as a convenient exchange medium that represents the products of the people's labors. It was well received by the common people in general, but the rich men disliked it, for it increased and strengthened the clamor for more money. and they happening to have no writers among them that were able to answer it, their opposition slackened and the point was carried by a majority in the House. My friends there, who conceived I had been of some service, thought fit to reward me by employing me in printing the money, a very profitable job and a great help to me. This was another advantage gained by my being able to write. Franklin's most meticulous biographer, Carl Van Doren, has provided this physical description of the young man who would someday receive international acclaim for his wisdom and accomplishments. Strongly built, rounded like a swimmer or a wrestler, not angular like a runner, he was 5 feet 9 or 10 inches tall, with a large head and square, deft hands. His hair was blonde or light brown, his eyes gray, full and steady, his mouth wide and humorous, with a pointed upper lip. His clothing was as clean as it was plain, though he and others say he was hesitant in speech, he was prompt in action. But in those days he was not famous, and he certainly had not yet developed the wisdom and discipline that would come to him in later years. He was only 20 years of age when he returned to Philadelphia in 1726, and this dangerous time of youth and the hazardous situations I was sometimes in among strangers, remote from the eye and advice of my father, occasionally led him into errata, which he afterwards regretted. He candidly acknowledged, for example, that hard-to-be governed passion of youth had hurried me frequently into intrigues with low women that fell in my way. At the same time, however, he expressed gratitude that the kind hand of Providence or some guardian angel or accidental favorable circumstances and situations, or altogether, preserved me without any willful gross immorality or injustice that might have been expected from my want of religion. Franklin explained how this want of religion had come about in his early teens while he still lived in Boston. My parents had early given me religious impressions and brought me through my childhood piously in the dissenting way. That is, they were dissenters from the Anglican Church, but I was scarce 15 when, after doubting by turns of several points as I found them disputed in the different books I read, I began to doubt of Revelation itself. Some books against deism fell into my hands. It happened that they wrought an effect on me quite contrary to what was intended by them, for the arguments of the deists, which were quoted to be refuted, appeared to be much stronger than their refutations. In short, I soon became a thorough deist. Considering himself a free thinker, Ben discussed his ideas with others and used his argumentative skill to persuade them that deism was right. In fact, one of the reasons he gave for deciding to run away from Boston in 1723 was that his indiscreet disputations about religion began to make me pointed at with horror by good people as an infidel or atheist. As we noted earlier, Franklin's unusual religious views also caused him to write and publish a questionable pamphlet on the doctrine of fate during his stay in London. But at least by 1728, he was asking himself some hard questions about his system of beliefs. My arguments perverted some others, but each of them having afterwards wronged me greatly without the least compunction, and recollecting Keith's conduct towards me, who was another freethinker, and my own towards Miss Reed, which at times gave me great trouble, I began to suspect that this doctrine of deism, though it might be true, was not very useful. My London pamphlet appeared now not so clever a performance as I once thought it, and I doubted whether some error had not insinuated itself unperceived into my argument, so as to infect all that followed, as is common in metaphysical reasonings. I grew convinced that truth, sincerity, and integrity in dealings between man and man were of the utmost importance to the felicity of life. Revelation had indeed no weight with me as such, but I entertained an opinion that though certain actions might not be bad because they were forbidden by it, or good because it commanded them, yet probably those actions might be forbidden because they were bad for us, or commanded because they were beneficial to us in their own natures. As his own observations and experience led him to further consider these ideas, Franklin gradually developed more concrete beliefs about the proper relationship between God and man. In November 1728, he wrote his Articles of Belief and Acts of Religion, which served as his personal creed and provided guidelines for his private worship through the remainder of his life. Included in the opening section, which he called First Principles, were these words: I conceive that he, God, has in himself some of those passions he has planted in us, and that since he has given us reason whereby we are capable of observing his wisdom in the creation, he is not above caring for us, being pleased with our praise and offended when we slight him or neglect his glory. I conceive for many reasons that he is a good being, and as I should be happy to have so wise, good, and powerful a being my friend, let me consider in what manner I shall make myself most acceptable to him. Next to the praise resulting from and due to his wisdom, I believe he is pleased and delights in the happiness of those he has created. And since without virtue man can have no happiness in this world, I firmly believe he delights to see me virtuous, because he is pleased when he sees me happy. I love him, therefore, for his goodness, and I adore him for his wisdom. Let me, then, not fail to praise my God continually, for it is his due, and it is all I can return for his many favors and great goodness to me. And let me resolve to the virtuous that I may be happy, that I may please him who is delighted to see me happy. Amen. Then followed prayers of praise and thanksgiving to the Creator, and another prayer petitioning him for divine help in eschewing vice and embracing virtue. The beginning passages in this series of petitions reveal Franklin's sense of duty to his country, as well as his feelings of obligation to God. That I may be preserved from atheism and infidelity, impiety and profaneness, and in my addresses to these carefully avoid irreverence and ostentation, formality and odious hypocrisy, help me, O Father, that I may be loyal to my prince and faithful to my country, careful for its good, valiant in its defense, and obedient to its laws, abhorring treason as much as tyranny. Help me, O Father. And that is the end of chapter 4.